Hello, my name is Elena Guardado, and I worked on funeral transportation from 1700 to 1900. And as we know, the funeral procession always has deep roots attached to it, and this is something that we're going to see throughout different time eras. The sentiment was always shared, honoring a life through their final journey. But it is a common thread that the method, level of ceremony, and the mood has always shifted depending on the culture, geography, and social status of the deceased. And that's what we'll be seeing here is a time where we're still having very ancient traditions, but we're starting to modernize a little bit, something a little more known to what is common with our times. And so families in the beginning of this time period still took care of their deceased in their homes and transported them themselves over to the cemetery. And usually a bier was used, a funeral bier, which is a frame. It kind of looks a bit like a table, but it has a way of people to carry them. And of course, the same as now, depending on the status or wealth of the person, was the ornamentation of their service could have been very simple or more people, more elaborate. There are funeral homes that have wagons or carts that they loan out to families if the distance is very long, or also other people in the community would loan their wagons or carts to families, horse-drawn carts for people to transport them over. But as more wagons are being available, as they're being able to be made more easily, they're starting to build a need for them. Okay, we can actually have a specialized cart for our funerals, not just a loaner wagon or something that you could use for everyday use and adapt it to a funeral service. We were starting to get a mix of the elements here. And of course, the train was a very iconic mode of transportation during this time. We all know about President Lincoln's funeral and also the transportation of the Civil War soldiers back home through the train, which is, I thought, very important to mention during this time period. The industry will be affected, as was the whole of the United States, with the Industrial Revolution. And our early to mid 1800s, the funeral coaches were made by specialized artisan coach makers, and these people had a very long set of skills like blacksmithing, varnishing, wheel fitting, stitching, leather working, and these owner-run shops started to be pushed out of the industry when large factories began to fill the demands of the coaches, because the demand was growing exponentially. They could not keep up with the amount of need. And so the carriages were also very expensive and hard to maintain. But one of our famous makers was Riddle Coach and Hearst Co. And this is a little insert of one of their magazines for their advertisements. Okay, and some of the coaches had the rollers that we still see being used in the modern hearses. And a lot of them were glass so that you could see inside. They had some of them even had seating for a family member to accompany the deceased. And one thing that was very interesting that came about this rise in demand for funeral coaches was the specialization of their fuel. So fuel for these coaches was horses, and horses were being bred specifically for certain types of carriages, for their look, for how their temperament was, and so there had to be specialized trainers, facilities for the horses to be available for the funeral home to use. There is questionable practices and treatment of the animals, but without the horses, you cannot have the horse-drawn funeral carriages and carts. But as we exited this time period, the horses were eventually going to be replaced by motorized vehicles